now let's open it up for 15 minutes of questions.
All right, excellent. Thank you all for bearing with us here. That's a lot of information, and we already, you'll be impressed, Danny, have gathered quite a few questions. So let us go to the most popular ones. And a reminder again, for those that haven't upvoted others, please feel free to go to pollev.com/CCL123 and help your question get to the top. So Danny, we've got 15 minutes, is that right?
Yes.
All right, let's start the timer, and here's the top one.
Okay, I promised Amy I would bring something up, so I'm going to answer this, but first I'm gonna keep my word to Amy. For liaisons who are on this call, please do not wait until the member of Congress office responds to log that you have sent the request. So as we try and keep on track and getting as many meetings as possible, it's important to log your progress. There's no need to wait. It will really help Amy if you log your progress now. So thank you, liaisons. There you go, Amy. Now this question, has there been any progress on getting a Senate bill? Our Senate office seems a little disappointed that the Senate hasn't progressed more, even with CCL's advocacy. So right now we are supporting many multiple carbon pricing bills. Our favorite is the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act. I do think that there is a lot of progress on the topic of carbon pricing in the Senate. Again, the White House bill I expect to be really, really interesting when it's public. I think that there will be a lot to like. I think it will add a lot of energy around carbon pricing and move things forward. So I do think that there's been a lot of progress on the Senate side in terms of carbon pricing, in terms of bills that we are asking you to support, asking our members of Congress to support. What can we say about how effective the price on carbon has been on other developed economies? There's a ton of data on this. And so Jerry Hinkle, one of our research coordinators, finished a series of webinars really diving deep on the economic case. And part of that is drawing on a report from, for example, the IMF. This is the thing that I remember. But that IMF report showed that with every country in Europe has a carbon price. And so with the EU ETS, you've seen jobs have been stable. If not, they've gone up. Carbon emissions are progressing in the right direction. There is a question about the level of that. And so that's why it's so important that we're seeing record highs above 50 euros in the EU. That is very new. That is very new. And remember, with the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act, that would be the price in year 5. Whereas this is, I think we're getting to year 16 for the EU ETS. And so that's I think a very good example of why CCL has always preferred an explicit fee to a cap and trade, because you have had this price uncertainty in Europe. But there's a ton of data about carbon prices. The biggest thing that mitigates the impact is that those carbon prices have been low, partly because this is the first time that any country is trying to put a border adjustment mechanism on that. And the biggest economy in the world is the United States. The largest economy available to US producers is the EU, but the largest economy in the world is the United States. And so when the largest economy in the world is not playing ball, that is a strong concern for other countries who are listening to scientists and who are listening to economists. Clean electricity standard appears to be the leading option as part of the American Jobs Plan. What advice do you have to discuss with MOCs? That is the relationship, if any, between clean electricity standard and carbon pricing. Yeah, we are not opposed to a clean electricity standard. And what I would lead with is there's no reason you can't have both. You can have both a clean electricity standard and a carbon price. But if there only has to be one, I, your constituent, prefer a carbon price, especially if you're taxed, because it's economy-wide. a clean electricity standard, it's electricity, it's just in the power sector. Does nothing for the transportation sector, nothing for buildings, nothing for industry. Carbon price is economy-wide. That's why I prefer it. It's a clearer price, and building off of this narrative that we're building, you can actually border adjust for a carbon price. You can't do that for a clean electricity standard because of those ambiguities that I went over earlier. So we're not attacking it. It's very important not to attack clean electricity standard. We are just saying that, pointing out you could do both. Technically, you can do both, but if it has to be one, we prefer a fee or tax because it's economy-wide and you can border adjust it. That's how I would answer that. Where is Manchin on carbon pricing? I think that the good senator from West Virginia is very concerned about West Virginians. I don't think that he is, he's going to consider West Virginia first. He's only going to do what his constituents want. And that's how really every elected representative should behave. They should play to their constituents. And so I think that Joe Manchin is open to a carbon price if he is convinced that it's going to be good for West Virginians. I think the key to that is getting Republican support on a carbon price. I'm going to talk about this more in the second segment. Getting Republican support on a carbon price, I think that frees up Joe Manchin to support a carbon price more than basically anything else. So I think that Manchin I think he's doing his best to represent West Virginians. I do think he's gettable. I don't think it's easy. Given the difficulties of getting bipartisan agreements, has our position on reconciliation versus regular order shifted? I'm going to address that in the next section, so I'm not going to answer that until I get to that next section. Why are we not asking Senate Democrats to introduce companion bill to HR 2307? We've tried that, and we tried that all last Congress, and it didn't happen. And so the answer here is the same I gave in March. I want to try something new. I don't want to direct you into something that we have 2 years of data where it didn't work. I want to make sure that you guys are empowered, and I don't see, the evidence suggests that is unlikely to lead to empowerment. So, moving on. How can it be a pay for if the carbon fee is to go back to the people? I will also talk about this in the next section, but a carbon price is a potential pay for. The Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act is not a potential pay for. You're right. If you use 100% of the revenue for a dividend, it's not a pay for. But the Durbin bill dedicates 80% ultimately of the revenue back as dividends. The White House bill is something comparable to that, and the Fitzpatrick bill doesn't do that at all. And so the space of carbon pricing bills is right now the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act is the only one that is 100% dividend. The demands of President Biden are that we do infrastructure and climate together. And so again, I'll talk about this more in the next section, but you are right, a 100% dividend cannot be a pay for, but a carbon price can be a pay for. You can still dedicate most of the revenue back to dividends and still have some revenue left over to build the coalition you need to pass something. What are the prospects for getting a Republican co-sponsor, for example, Brian Fitzpatrick? I'm still feeling good about the possibility of getting Republicans on carbon pricing bills that are not the Market Choice Act. I still think that there's a possibility for bipartisan introduction of a carbon pricing bill, maybe the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act, maybe something different. I still think that there are Republicans who can be convinced. I think that this international argument with the key that if we don't act, we're not listening to America. We make it harder for American businesses to compete, and we are effectively outsourcing money that could have stayed here. We're sacrificing revenues American revenues. We're taking money out of American pockets and putting them in European and Canadian pockets. I think that that could be a useful way of achieving this aim of getting bipartisan support. Is Biden in favor of a carbon price? Well, he was on his campaign. He advocated for it in the primary. What we've seen is that he's open to it. Obviously, he did. Again, I'll talk about this in the next section. He did include a clean electricity standard, not a carbon price, in his proposal. Why did he do that? I think it's because of the electoral politics. I don't think it has anything to do with the policy. I think it's the politics. So you look back at 1993, the BTU tax, Democrats lost the majority. You look back at 2010 with Waxman Markey, Democrats lost the majority. I think that there is a narrative, not just with Biden, but with Democrats in general, that if you attempt to do a carbon price and you fail, you get creamed in the midterm. And so I think that the reason that Biden would consider starting to talk about this and entering this into his discussions, if he was convinced that it had a chance of passing, or if he could point to enough Republicans who were serious about it, where he could defend himself from what Republicans did in '93 and 2010 was say this is a tax. And so if he could defend that by making it bipartisan, those are the two conditions, if he passage and defending it, that I think that he would consider adding this. I think that Biden likes a carbon price. How are we on time, Brett? How many minutes have I done?
We have 3 more minutes, so let's do 3 questions.
3 more minutes, all right.
A mini wildcat.
Isn't the border adjustment still a small impact compared to the whole size of the U.S. economy? If an MOC believes the carbon tax hurts the economy, wouldn't they believe that the border adjustment is less pain than the carbon tax? Let me read this again. So it depends on which MOC you're talking about. For Democrats, this matters because, again, Biden has tied his success to moving climate on the international stage, and our peers, the richest economies in the world, other developed countries, they are pricing carbon and they're demanding accountability. So Biden is not going to be able to achieve that goal unless we have a border carbon adjustment. For Republicans, if an MOC believes that a carbon tax hurts the economy, again, we have a lot of data that it doesn't. Jerry's series on that, it's available on Community. You can check that out. Lots of great arguments, lots of great data showing that a carbon price does not hurt the economy. And wouldn't they believe that the border adjustment is less pain than the carbon tax? This is a policy question. So this is ultimately a political play. What we're trying to do with the border adjustment narrative is look at the politics. It looks really bad for Democrats and Republicans if we are surrendering revenues that could have stayed here, that could have been paying for Democrat or Republican priorities to other countries. It looks really, really bad. And I think that negative optics, I want to test whether or not that would overcome any negative thoughts they might have in terms of what they think inaccurately a carbon price would have on the economy as a whole. So that's what I think about that. The senator expressed skepticism that the EU border carbon adjustment was really certain because no details have been released. Response, evidence that will be really in place when suggested. They're coming out with more details on July 14th. That's been announced. There was a 444 to 71 votes in, I think it was in May, maybe it was April, of the EU Parliament saying, yeah, we want to do this. So there's overwhelming interest from the EU bloc in doing this, and stay tuned for July 14th.
All right, let's do one last question here.
What's a good angle to take for congresspersons who really care about the oil and gas industry? A really good angle to take is that the American Petroleum Institute has issued a statement of support in favor of a carbon price, and NOIA, the National Ocean Industries Association, has issued a statement of support in favor of carbon pricing. NOIA includes offshore platforms, all the people who manufacture that. So if you have a member who's really concerned about oil and gas, cite the oil and the gas associations who have supported this. All right. Moving on, so now we have more questions. That one was not as long. So this one, I think we have 10 minutes, Brett.
Yeah, let's make it 5. That way we can get to the full content, if that's all right with you, and stick on for questions after that. Awesome. So here you go. Do you feel like you've addressed this one already?
Yeah, I think that I've addressed that. No, we still want to see a regular order bill. That's the best case scenario. We still think it's possible. We're pushing for that. And the fact that we are pushing that separates us from a lot of other groups, because a lot of other groups on the left have totally given up on regular order. We have not. And if they've totally given up on regular order, if they're only talking reconciliation, they're going to have a very difficult time getting into Republican offices. So we have not given up on regular order. That is our best case scenario. We're considering the strategic implications of our actions for reconciliation, but what we want is a regular order bipartisan bill. If every other developed country in the world except Australia's carbon price and global emissions are still going up, doesn't that make the carbon pricing look rather weak and ineffective? Only if you're, this is an argument that some left of center groups make, only if you're failing to consider the carbon price. And so what we've seen, what the data shows, is that if you have weak carbon prices, you have weak results. And so that's why it's so important that the EU is experiencing record carbon prices again, $50. This is the White House bill is going to start at $50. And our bill would get there in year 5. The EU trajectory is higher. It's over 100 euros in the near future. And the Canadian price is 170 euros. If you're getting up to prices that high, then you're going to see prices change. And so I think that this is this argument, which you do hear from groups on the left who have moved away from the recommendations of scientists and economists. You do hear this, but the key consideration is, what is the price? You need to have that rate of increase every year, and you need to be ratcheting it up to prices that are really going to achieve those equivalence points where renewables are cheaper than fossil fuels. Renewables need to be cheaper than fossil fuels. That's the goal. A Senate aide said a carbon price, even with the dividend, is still a mandate and not an incentive. How would you respond? You need both. You need mandates and you need incentives. If you don't have a mandate, people just can, excuse me, not a mandate. If you don't have a price, if you don't have a disincentive to just consume more energy, people just consume more energy. And then instead of having, and then you just have more energy that you need to install, more renewable energy that you need to install, more fossil fuel energy that you need to displace. You need both. This is the message that economists give. You need both a carrot and a stick. And a carbon price, which is a stick, it does not exclude carrots. And that's okay. Again, we listen to economists. You need both. What about China? China has a carbon price. They've had it for some time. And they, as I mentioned, they are more rapidly deploying their rollout of that carbon price in response to the EU's discussions on a carbon border adjustment mechanism. So China is acting, and that's the way it is. What role is Schumer going to play? Schumer is going to play a very important role. As the majority leader in the Senate, he, of course, has a very, very important role. So I think that some things, I think we can count on Schumer to be very in tune with his caucus, with the Democrats. I think we can count on Schumer to be in touch with the Biden administration, to have priorities that align with Biden's priorities. I think that he is certainly open to a carbon price. It's just he's going to need to see that it has legs. Again, that consideration, I do think that 93 and 2010 loomed large in the minds of all Democrats, including Schumer. And so I think that he'll be considering do we have a good shot at this? What cover do my moderate members have from Republicans to get out on this and to vote for this?
Excellent questions. Let's do one more and then we'll go on for now and come back for one last section.
There's a sense from Democrats in Congress that they have to be productive and do something, even if it's not bipartisan, because they have control or have equal numbers of Congress in the presidency. Is CCL willing to get a bill passed that is solely Democratic supported? We really, really, really want Republicans on board. And I think, as I mentioned, I laid out the scenario where you have Republican support for a standalone bill, and that provides enough cover to Manchin Sinema in a reconciliation bill that includes that. And I think that we're in the same camp. If you have a reconciliation bill that we expect only Democratic support on, but it includes components of a carbon price that Republicans have supported, we're a climate organization, and what we support is climate policy. And so I think that all we're going to evaluate that final reconciliation bill is the climate policy that is therein. And so I think that in that sense, the calculus is similar. I can see us recommending support for that reconciliation bill.
So with that, we are going to stay on for another 8 minutes, and we'll get to as many of these as we can. If you've never seen Danny in full wildcat mode, it's a phenomenon to behold. So let's see how many we can cram in here, everyone, and stay safe.
So we'll wildcat it now. If China has a carbon price, could they slam us with a border tax adjustment as well? Yes, they could. Next question. What about the idea of being talked about using the EPA mandated carbon price? You're referring to the James Hansen op-ed, and you know what? If one president does it, the next president can undo it. So it lacks the durability. Sure, maybe you could do it, but it's not durable. And our trading partners will know that, and they will treat it with that grain of salt. So maybe it's still not as good as Congress acting. How does the carbon price act as a pay for if our bill refunds all dividends? It's not our bill, it's Congressman Deutsch's bill. But right now, Congressman Deutsch's bill is the only bill that has 100% dividend. The other bills are doing this, and if we do end up in what I said was the most likely scenario, given President Biden's needs, we're probably going to end up with a big infrastructure / climate package that has a lot of stuff that needs paying for. And he will be picking, Congress will be picking bits and pieces from other bills. Hopefully a lot of that goes back as dividends, but it's, if we end up in that scenario where the reality is that Congress is going to need to pay for, and they're probably going to take some of that revenue to pay for all of the other stuff. So it's in that context of a Franken bill. What is CCL's DC staff doing to promote EICDA? Who are you focusing on specifically? Will you be speaking at any hearings? Wow, kind of aggressive. We're doing a lot. We are short-staffed right now. We did all the background research, talked to a lot of people, read a lot of notes, read a lot of news articles, spent a lot of time thinking about how to condense this for you so you could take it and use it and port it out somewhere else. Who are we focusing on specifically? We're focusing on whomever is relevant to the discussion. Mentioned a lot of those names. And we also do strive to serve volunteers when they have a problem with their specific member of Congress. We are here to serve you in your needs for achieving our goals for a livable world. Would a U.S. carbon price conflict with Biden's promise of new taxes on income under $400,000? I do understand that is a prime concern for Biden. I do think that he is really concerned about that campaign pledge. I do think that there are ways to get around it, but I do think that that's going to be something that needs to be addressed for President Biden. What are the chances of a White House bill being introduced in the House? If the White House bill gets more broad support, that can be an ask for House members. Yes, I think there's a good chance it'll be reintroduced in the House. And yes, in the November lobby day, if we're still having this discussion, then I do think that could be something that we point to for House members. What are the chances of the White House bill being, oh, I already did that. How do you respond to Republicans who are moderate, but in districts or states where former President Trump is popular and that elected official is coming up for re-election in 2022? That's everybody in the House. All Republicans, everybody in the House is up for re-election in 2022. I think that you recognize that this is a human being who wants to be re-elected. You know their district. You can hear what they're talking about. And the fact is that you still have Republicans, even very Trumpy Republicans, who are interested in addressing climate change. We have a different world than we did 5 years ago before the Gibson resolution. You have a world where the Republican Party as a whole, Republican leadership, wants to address climate change. The solutions they're proposing are not in line with the science. And so our task with these Republicans is to meet them where they're at, pick up on, identify the leadership of their party who is saying we need to address climate, and you want to try and move them up to that next level of support, that next level of ambition. So listen, meet them where they're at, use your local knowledge to push that kernel of truth further and further. We've already come a long way in a relatively short time. Will legislators argue that we're different than other developed economies because EU candidates lean more socialist, and charging a carbon tax won't affect their economy as it would our capitalist economy, so it isn't apples to apples in their mind? How would you address that? It's everybody. Every developed country is doing this. And so, yeah, there are differences between one economy and the other, but this is everybody. And so I think that I think you're really talking, we've been going so long that my battery ran out on my light. I think you're really only talking about Republicans here. And this is where I think the argument about the two arguments I've been highlighting throughout this presentation about we don't want money that should stay in America going to other countries. That's an important argument. And the fact that the border carbon adjustment enforces good behavior in the likes of China and Russia, I think that those are going to be the keys for pushing back on this with the Republican office. I don't think you'll have that with Democratic offices. There's so much rhetoric from Democrats who have become discouraged and hostile to the idea of getting Republican support on climate. How do we respond to MOCs and LAs who are suspicious of us simply because we still encourage bipartisanship? Make it about their future. Make it about Biden. Take that. Biden needs an international win on climate, and if he can't get it, guess who's losing the House? Guess who's losing the Senate? Guess who's losing the presidency? The Democrats. And so you take from these partisan Democrats, you take their frame, you listen to that, and you point out what should be obvious to them, that if they don't win on climate, they need to win on climate with a carbon price, and they can't. So you just listen, understand where they're at, do that research. What if our MOC says that we can't trust Russia or China to enforce their carbon pricing laws? It doesn't matter. It's not China or Russia who are doing this, it's Europe. We need to worry about Europe, we need to worry about Canada. We need to worry about our biggest trading partner, and we need to worry about the biggest foreign market available to us taking money that should stay in the United States. We need to worry about them creating a playing field where we need to worry about American companies having a disadvantage because they don't have that price incentive here. They may very well decide to relocate jobs to within that carbon pricing block from the United States, so they don't have to deal with the hassle of the carbon border adjustment mechanism. So I think that it's not really about China and Russia. It's really about Europe. It's really about Canada demanding accountability for emissions.
All right, Danny, we're at time where you get to pick your favorite last one remaining. And for the rest of those, feel free to put them in the forums.
Let's see here. Our senators, both Dems, are conspicuously quiet about climate. Any suggestions on how we might get them to talk about it publicly? I think that without knowing more about the Democrats, I think what I would do is I would listen to what they are talking about, and I would weave climate into that. and show them how they can make the points they're already making better if they have a strong position on climate. So again, listening is key to this work. Listen to what they're saying, listen to how they present themselves, and figure out how they might weave in this narrative that you want them to tell to the story they're already telling, to what they're already presenting to people. That's what I would recommend.